and Aurobindo. You see why the creation of Aurobindo became an absolute necessity. Because Aurobindo is supposed to be the spiritualized society and experiment on that level. And remember the word, it is not a spiritual society, it is spiritualized. And there the meaning is quite different. He would say, a spiritualized society would treat in its sociology the individual, from the saint to the criminal, not as units of a social problem to be passed through some skillfully devised machinery and either flattened into the social mold or crushed out of it, but as souls suffering and entangled in a net and to be rescued, souls growing and to be encouraged to grow, etc. The aim of its economics would be not to create a huge engine of production, whether of the competitive the aim of economics would be not to create a huge engine of production, whether of the competitive or the cooperative kind, but to give men the joy of work according to their own nature. In its politics, it would not regard the nations within the scope of their own internal life as enormous state machines, etc. Now what I just read out a couple of lines, but only to tell you the meaning of spiritualized means spirituality practiced on every level of human endeavor. It is not just meditation or living in recluse and living in an ashram. All human activity, be it politics, be it economics, be it sociology, be it ethics, be it literature, anywhere and everywhere, the spiritual aspect must be practiced. And then, when we say spiritual aspect, you see, once we have the spiritual consciousness, then there is a whole new chain that comes in. There will be production, there will be material, there will be money, there will be all this. But then the whole attitude changes. It's not a competitive, it's not cooperative, but it's really to see that each one, where the mother herself tells in Aurobindo, I remember her message, I was there at the time, but she says the ideal of Aurobindo is to see that each one gets work according to his nature. So mother really did not say that you must do this work in Aurobindo and not that. She said each one must get the work according to his nature, be it a poet or a dramatist or a sculptor or a businessman or anybody. So that is quite an ideal thing. So what I want to say is the spiritualized means in every human endeavor is capped with a spiritual attitude. And this is in the present times, for me at least, they are the complementary ashram and Aurobindo. Because when the mother tells about Aurobindo, there is a city that the earth requires, that earth needs. You see, it took me some time to really realize why there are so many thousands of cities and new and old. But here is one that the earth requires, because with these spiritual individuals who have been very well prepared in the ashram, well, I don't have to get into the history of the ashram, most of you may not know, and some of you may know. But this has been a place where individuals have been prepared, where individuals have gone down the road given to us by Mother Sri Aurobindo. They have reached, some of them, a couple of them at least I know their names, who have reached the pinnacle, the supermind itself. So having done that, it was essential and necessary for Mother to start a community. Because ashram itself is a community, but it's too small a community to say it's a spiritualized society. But the basics are here also. But she created this large Aurobindo, an international body, so that the spiritual society could be created. Now these are the two things that Sri Aurobindo would tell us on the level of spiritual society. But then, I'll just go through a couple of other things. Aurobindo gives us some indications of the future forms, which could be an indication that there is a hope that mankind is moving towards in the right line. And there, the first thing that he speaks about, again in his ideal of human unity and human cycle, is internationalism. This is again a very important factor, because remember Aurobindo's dreams. The third dream he speaks of is this human unity. And he says even when he was there 100 years back, he already saw, he says, I can see the increasing sense of internationalism where the world could come together. There's a possibility of a world union. Of course, ideal of human unity has gone much into detail of what are the steps of this world union, how it's going to come about. And there he discusses in great detail, especially starting with the League of Nations. He says, in spite of all the failures that the League of Nations brought to us, because it was not well conceived, he says, the idea was there. And that is one of the explanations given to us by Aurobindo, the reason of the world wars. He says the two major world wars took place only to break this national ego, to bring about the next evolutionary step in humankind. And what is that evolutionary step? This question of the world unity. You see, for centuries, mankind has developed these nations, France, and Italy, and Germany, and everywhere. But these nations are successful. But then he says nature wanted to go to the next step, next evolutionary step, that of bringing mankind together. And there the nations were very rigid in their egoism. They forgot that this can be a world, one world family. So Aurobindo would tell us that nature had to thrust upon man these world wars to break this national ego. And because of that, we have this League of Nations. So he's saying it's surprising that how nature brought about this next evolutionary step through process of suffering. But in a very short span of time, already it had achieved to break through this idea. Then of course, League of Nations, he says, it was much conceived by egoistic nations for their own self-interest. So it did not succeed. But luckily, he says, nature came out with this United Nations organizations. And there he says, that is the kind of the cornerstone of the future of humanity. And so he has a great hope, great faith in the United Nations organizations. And he says, based on that, the same pattern, we will have a world state. A world state that could really see to the harmony, to justice, to the peace of this world, of the different countries. But beyond that, there is one more interesting factor that he would speak about. One is the world state, the other is the world union. Now these are two different things. For world state, he would say, we would move in the lines of United Nations and really increase the power, and slowly we'll get into a bigger organization. Where now we have an example in European Union. In fact, this is an interesting factor which most of you might have known by now. That way back in 1919, almost 100 years back, Aurobindo spoke of European Union. At a time when the world had hardly even thought about a European Union, Aurobindo had written clearly what are the steps by which the European Union would be formed and achieved. And if you look back at the history of European Union, you will see more or less they've fallen into the same stages of development as Aurobindo analyzed. So he says, now this will be the pattern of the future world union. That means he would say, that there would be collectives, agglomerations, he says, continental agglomerations. Yeah, that's an interesting word. It says continental agglomerations. So that means there will be a federation of free nations. I'm just giving you these two phrases from him to tell you that how there will be a gradual world unity. He says it will start with a continental agglomeration. That means there's a beautiful example in European Union. He says similarly there will be Asiatic countries, there could be African countries who will get into this kind of an agglomeration of continents, now of countries. But then, what is most important is this federation of free nations. You see, Europe has got together more or less on a geographical pattern, European Union. But that is not necessary. In fact, this was a point that was much discussed in the international zone of Aurobindo, that how should there be a clubbing of this continental agglomeration? So would it be Europe and Asia and Africa and Americas and then Southeast Asia, etc. and then Australia, etc. Aurobindo would say no. It would not be again a federation of countries based on the continents. On the contrary, he says it will be free nations. That means, he says, for example, in England and Australia, they have the same cultural roots. So they could be coming together. If it's not that India and Pakistan, of course, they have the same cultural roots. But he gives the example of Ireland and India. He said geographically we are far apart. Continentally we belong to two different continents. But then he says this federation would be of free nations, means nations which vibe with each other culturally. And not only culturally, of course, culturally Ireland and India are pretty different. But he says the nation's soul, that's what is the important word. That Ireland's nation's soul is one that is based on mysticism. Russia, there could be an ideal federation between Russia, India and Ireland. Because these are the three countries which are based on mysticism and spirituality. So he goes putting together countries based on their nation souls. But that is one pattern that could come up. And he gives an example of the European Union, and we will see in the future other things that come up.